What exactly is going on at Rocky Mountain National Park? I've received a lot of submissions via email about strange sightings and encounters while people are visiting the park. Rocky Mountain National Park spans over 265,000 acres. There's over 280 different species of birds at the park, and the park is also home to mountain lions, bighorn sheep, coyotes, and black bear, to name a few. Rocky Mountain National Park gets over 3 million visitors each and every year, so there's bound to be some strange occurrences that are being reported. In today's episode, I have several accounts from people just like you, but more importantly, did you know that 45% of Dreadhead subscribers preferred eating Captain Crunch as a kid over Lucky Charms, Count Chocula, or Fruity Pebbles? So if you ever crunched into a Crunch Berry, go ahead and crunch that subscribe button because I release strange encounters at national and state parks every single day. August 17th, 2011. My brother and I lived in Boulder, Colorado, so we camp at Rocky Mountain National Park quite a bit, at least a few times a year. We grew up here, and when my dad passed away a few years ago, my brother and I wanted to carry on his love for camping and being outdoors. He always took us as kids, and we've been to the park literally hundreds of times. I've seen so much wildlife there, but I never had an experience like I did this last trip we took in August. We went on a Wednesday, so the park was less crowded. My brother has a 2005 Jayco travel trailer that we stayed in. My dad bought it the year before he passed away. It's only a little over an hour drive to get there, so we headed out early Wednesday morning. And we were only planning to stay for 2 days. We got there around 10 a.m. and parked at our reserved spot at Moraine Park Campground. We usually camp there or Glacier Basin when it's open. We got everything set up and we drove to the Cub Lake Loop trailhead. We love hiking this trail. It's about 6 miles and you get a lot of lake and meadow and mountain views. Plus we always see wildlife while we're on the trail. It took us 8 hours to hike it. We like taking our time and stopping a lot. We weren't in any hurry. When we got back to camp, we had dinner. My brother makes these jalapeno cheddar burgers where he mixes in the jalapenos with the cheese. It's delicious. Anyways, so after dinner, it's starting to get dark out, and we're sitting there BSing by the fire and decided to call it a night. We got everything ready to sleep, and I look out the window and I see eyes staring at me. They weren't moving and they were tall, like it was a large animal. I told my brother, "Hey, get over here and look at this." He came over and said, "Yeah, what the hell is that?" I said, "I don't know, but we're going to find out." I went into my bag and got my super bright LED flashlight that I just got on Amazon, and I shined it right in that direction. God Almighty, I felt like I just saw the devil himself. My brother grabbed me and said a few choice cuss words. We stood there illuminating this thing from head to toe, and I don't understand what we saw. This animal was standing upright like a grizzly, but there are no grizzlies in Colorado. But it didn't look like a bear. It looked like the head of a dog, like a giant coyote or a wolf. It stared at us and it looked annoyed that we were shining our light on it. And then it got on all fours and just took off. Now this was around 10 p.m. My brother and I didn't fall asleep until 3 or 4 in the morning. We were so pumped up from seeing this thing, and not in a good way either. Now we've never cut a camping trip short, but this was the first time. When we woke up the next morning, we hooked up the travel trailer and we were out of there. June 1st, 2015. My husband and I love to travel. His job requires that he works 3 weeks, and in turn he gets 3 weeks off. It's kind of an unusual setup. So during the weeks that he's home, I usually plan a vacation or an excursion and we'll travel. We don't currently have any kids, so we try to capitalize on all the free time that we have until we start a family. We've been everywhere together: Europe, the Caribbean, Alaska, and even Australia. However, our most memorable trip was when we went to Rocky Mountain National Park. We took off from our home in Garden City, Kansas, and headed west. The trip takes us about 6 hours. We arrived at the park pretty close to the east entrance. We found a perfect spot. There was an old campfire we could clean out and use, and access to the lake and trails was right there. We got lucky, the spot was ideal. We set up our tent and had a little snack, and it was a little later in the afternoon, so we couldn't go on a long hike, so we grabbed our fishing poles and walked down to the lake. On the bank, we noticed some fishing poles, some bait, and a few beers, but there were no fishermen. We figured we were in the right place. Almost immediately after casting my line, I noticed my husband staring at something across the bank. I followed his eyes, but I couldn't make out anything. When I asked what he was looking at, he said he saw something big moving around, most likely an elk or a bear. I got my phone ready just in case. In hindsight, I should have pressed a little harder. I noticed a strange look in his eyes, one that I've only seen a few times. It was fear. As we kept fishing, suddenly I saw something directly across from us. My husband was already looking at it. I couldn't tell what it was. I could only see it moving in the shadows of the trees. But it was massive. It was definitely moving stealthily, almost tiptoeing. It didn't want to be seen. As we're both staring over at the edge of the woods, it steps out, and it's this massive dog-like creature. This thing was on 2 legs like a human. It had to be at least 7 or 8 feet tall, just covered in fur. It blended in so well, I'm surprised that we even saw him. He was looking directly at us, and our only saving grace was the small part of the lake that separated us. At the same time, my husband and I dropped both of our fishing poles and ran back to the truck. We got back to camp and threw what little stuff we had unpacked in the truck. We ripped the tent stakes out of the ground, balled up the tent, and left the same way we came. We didn't know what else to do. Should we report what we had just saw? No one else was around. We were both speechless in the truck when my husband drove off. The next day, after staying in a hotel, I called the park administration center and reported what we saw. They listened, but I could tell they didn't care or didn't believe me. The man I spoke with said what I had seen was likely a bear. No way. I'm 35 years old with 20/20 vision. I know what a bear looks like. We have never ventured back to Rocky Mountain National Park, and I doubt we ever will. July 17th, 2000. I've never been outdoorsy. My parents loved the outdoors, and so did my sister. We used to take adventurous vacations that involved a lot of hiking, challenging, and quite frankly, terrifying trails, whitewater rafting, or whatever other adventure my mom could find for us. I didn't hate it, and I did get to see a lot of beautiful sights across the country, but I was never completely comfortable on our trips. To this day, I'm the type of person who likes a soft bed, good food, and a nice bathroom. The summer I turned 13 was a trip that will be with me forever, even when I try to forget about it. My mom's college roommate had moved to Colorado, so we were going to stay with her and her family and check out Rocky Mountain National Park. I was somewhat relieved that we would be at least staying in a house instead of camping. My parents loved to travel, but they loved to save money whenever possible, so we typically stayed at a campground when we visited national parks or anywhere else where there were campgrounds. This was actually turning out to be a great trip. My parents had gone hiking at Rocky Mountain National Park one day and actually let us stay back at the house with their friends. I couldn't believe my mom let me stay and played video games, but I know she wanted to do some challenging hikes that my sister and I would not have enjoyed. On the last day of our trip, we were all going to the park. Since we were hiking with my mom's friend and their younger kids, we were doing shorter hikes that day. The Wild Basin area had waterfalls and easy hikes, so that's where we started. I don't remember the name of the trail, but there were supposed to be several waterfalls, and I was told it was going to be an easy hike, so I brought my binoculars. I wouldn't exactly describe it as easy, at least that's how I remember it. I was feeling sick in my stomach as we were hiking. My mom told me to drink water, which really wasn't helping. We were probably about an hour into the hike when I started to feel really sick. We had just stopped to take a break and have a snack and rest for a bit. I started to feel really sick and told my mom I was going to throw up. I didn't want to do it in front of everyone, so I ran off into the trees. I didn't make it far before I vomited a lot. This wasn't unusual for me. I threw up a lot as a kid. I actually felt a lot better until I heard something and looked to my right. That's when I saw it, something off in the distance. This black mass moving through the high grass. As soon as I saw it, I remember thinking I need to go back to my family, but I just stood there staring at it. It dawned on me that I had my binoculars, so I put them up to my eyes and tried to focus them. I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. It was something standing like a man, but it was so tall, my first thought that I was looking at a Bigfoot. I mean, I knew Bigfoot wasn't real, but what was I looking at? It resembled a gorilla, but much taller and not as stocky as a gorilla. My mom told us we might see a bear, but this was definitely no bear. It kind of looked like a dog, a huge muscular dog, but it was standing upright. As I was watching it through the lens, it turned and it looked at me. I was at least 100 yards away, but I swear it looked directly through the lens and made eye contact with me. I'll never forget the feeling that gave me. As soon as it noticed me watching it, it dropped to all fours and took 3 large bounds into the woods. This was definitely not an animal I had ever seen before. I couldn't move. I was just frozen there. This whole time I was so far away from it, but once I saw how much ground it covered, it didn't seem like that anymore. I ran back to my family, and the next thing I remember, I was jumping into my mom's arms, crying and shaking. I had explained what I had seen to everyone, and they insisted that I must have seen a black bear. At the time, I just agreed with them. I comforted myself by thinking it must have been a bear. Now that I'm older, I know for certain that it wasn't a bear. However, I still don't know what I saw out there that day.